All right. I'll go ahead and start, even though there's not many people. That's fine. Just as a kind of general rule for these, normally what I do is I'll kind of type out or write out the notes, like the important pieces of the notes, as like like the starting screen, and you guys can just kind of look over those and remind yourselves of what's happening. For this, it's a little bit different because it's mostly just on Excel, and as soon as you know what each of the things I'm asking is, it shouldn't be that difficult. All right, so things to come that'll happen in the future. But for now, we're just on Excel. Okay, so if you need this, if you need a different or a blank Excel sheet, something that isn't saved or whatever, you can find this in On Campus. It's under the Chapter 1 material. It's labeled Practice Test. And this is exactly what your practice this is exactly what your test is going to look like. Okay, so there's going to be a stem and leaf question. There's going to be a histogram and frequency table question. There's going to be a question about distribution types. There's going to be a pie chart or bar graph question. It'll specify. And then there's a Pareto chart. Okay, so this is exactly what your test is going to look like. You will have to do each of these things on your computer during the test. Okay, now you're only going to be allowed open Excel. Like I'll be on Dino and I'll make sure we can actually take it on our own. But this is a good place to review it. All right, so I'm just going to go through these step by step. I might mute myself at some point because there are some things that are just like tedious here, but they don't take long. It's just, it is what it is. So if you have questions, just ask them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them as we go. All right. So number one, the following data represents trunk circumference in millimeters for a random sample of 64-year-old apple trees at East Mullen Agriculture Research Center in England. All right, and first question says to make a stem and leaf display of the tree circumference. So a stem and leaf display, that's just a display where we have like the tens places on the left, and then we have the numbers, and each time they show up on the right. Okay, and that'll make more sense here in a second. First thing we have to do for a stem and leaf display, though, is sort them, or the easiest thing to do is to sort them in order. All right, so I'm going to take all this data, and I'm actually going to make a column out of it. So I'm just going to copy and paste it kind of over here. Doesn't really matter where. All right, so all I'm doing is highlighting, Control C, Control V, and that's it. This isn't really part of the test, it's kind of just a side effect. And once we have all of those in a column, it's going to be really easy to make this Pareto chart. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of this data. We're going to sort them from smallest to largest, and then we're going to make the Pareto chart. Okay, so I'm going to highlight them. Okay, at the top up here, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but at the top in this gray area, kind of above the actual files, there's a sort and filter. It should be highlighted right now. If we click that and do sort smallest to largest, just click it. It takes all of these numbers and puts them in order from smallest to largest. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to sort these by the tens places. Right, so it starts in the 60s. So our left number is going to be 6, goes to 7, 8, 9, 10, 110, 120, I think. So it goes into the 130s and 140s. So 130s and 140s. And what we're going to do is we're going to input the ones places in each of these boxes over on the left, or on the right, sorry. So there is one in the 60s, that is 69. So 9 goes right here. And this represents the data point 69. Okay. There is 175. And this represents the data point 75. Okay. There's a couple of 80s. So this signifies 83. And then there's an 84, which is signified like that. All right. So 84, there's 83, and then there's 84. Then the 90s, there's a couple. So there's 90, there's 91, there's another 91, there's a 96, and then there's 3 99s. For the hundreds, right, that's the 10. There's a 100. There's a 101. There's a 102. There's another 102. 103. 3 105s. 2 106s, so I'm going to have to make more room. Okay, that should be enough. All right, so where am I? 105, so 1, 2, 3. There's 3 105s. There's 3 106s. And there's still more. So I can do, yeah. I'm just going to insert more cells. Sorry, this is the tedious part. You don't, I'm not worried about this part on the test. I just want to make sure that you can see all of this on screen, which is why I'm making this a big deal. Okay, so our 106s. There's 3 106s. There's 4 108s, and I'm still going to have to make room. Four 108s, and then 2 109s. Right, that should be the largest part we have. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Okay, so we have something that looks like that. And then we have to do the 110s, right? So we go to anything that's above 110, or in the 110 places. Okay, so we have a 110. So this data point is 110. We have a 111 and 112. Another 112. 2 113s. 3 114s. 2 115s. A 116. 5 7s. And a 119, so just enough room. Right, so if I zoom out just a little bit more. Right, that's our Pareto chart so far. Okay, and then the 120s, there aren't as many of these, I hope. There's 2 120s. Four 122s. 123, 124, and 125, and a 129. And then for 130s, there's a 138, and there's two 142s. Okay, so that was a little bit of a pain just because I kept running out of room. But that's our Pareto chart. Okay, where this row, that symbolizes like the, right, so 6 implies 60, and then these are all the ones places. 7 implies 70, 8 implies 80, 9 implies 90, 10, 100, 11, 110, 12, 120, 130, and 140. Okay, so that's the Pareto chart. That's what that whole thing means. And the reason we would do this is because this this keeps all of the data, right? We could go through each of these numbers and we could get the data back. And it tells us kind of the distribution of it. All right. We're going to look at that again in this frequency table. Okay. So I'm going to make a little bit of room. Okay, so part B says make a frequency table with 7 classes showing class limits, class boundaries, min and max, and the frequencies. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, can you teach us how to do the Vlookup function? That'd be great, but I've already kind of put a lot of stuff in here. Hi, Jonah, how are you doing, by the way? And while you do that, I'll explain what I need to do next. Okay, first thing we need to do is we need to find the range of all this data. So we need to find the max. So this is where I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, if I can. Okay, so we need to find the max. So that means equals max. And then we're going to open a set of parentheses. We're going to highlight this data, and then we're just going to hit enter. I'm great, Jonah. This year has been a lot more normal, which has been nice. So I'm just going to label that max. We need to find the minimum. So we do pretty much the same thing. We do equals min, open a set of parentheses, highlight the data, hit enter, and that returns the minimum. So then we find the range, which kind of tells us the length of all this data. And that is just equal to this number minus this number. We just hit enter, and that gives us the range of the data. So from 69, which is our lowest piece of data, up to 142, that's 73, 73 long, right? I don't know what the unit would be of that, but that's okay. All right. So then this says, so we have the range, and we want to have 7 classes. So we need to split up 73 units evenly. Okay, so if we do class size, that would be equal to this thing divided by 7, which is 10.42. We always round up. So our class size is actually 11. Okay, so in making these classes, I'm going to, I'm going to label a couple classes. So I'm going to highlight 2. You don't have to do this. Sorry, this is class 1. This is class 2. And what I'm doing here, again, you don't need to, but I'm highlighting 2 boxes and I'm merging them. And just as a, I don't know, a little bit of help, this is like the hardest part. Not the hardest part, it's the longest part. Just because there's a lot going into it. Okay, so class 1, we're going to start that maybe just below our minimum. So I'm going to start this at 68. And then all we're going to do is add 11 to it. So this is equal to 68 plus 11. And before people start panicking, I am not worried about where these things start, just so long as I can see your logic, right? It probably shouldn't start at the minimum. It should probably start just before the minimum, or like just after the maximum. Just so there's a range of data, okay? So if this number is, if you chose like 67 or whatever, that's fine, as long as the max is within these classes, okay? If you chose 69 and it went a little above the max, that's okay too, which is probably not preferential, all right? We just need to be able to do this. All right, so class 1 is 68 to 79, right? That's 68, that's just below our minimum, and then we're adding 11 to that, which we got right here. Next class starts 1 above that, and then we're going to do equals this plus 11. All right, we just continue to do that, and that's creating the classes. Oops. Great. Okay, so this is the class limits and class boundaries. So we have the min and max of each class. We know how big each of them are. And now we just need to find the frequencies. Okay, so again, I'm going to merge and center, and I think I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. So each of these boxes will be how much shows up in each of these classes. All right, so the way we do that, and I'm going to maybe zoom in just a little bit more just so we see it, because we don't need that data anymore. There we go. All right, so the way we do that, actually we do need that data, so I'm going to zoom out just a touch. All right, so we're going to do equals, and we want the computer, we want Excel to count the number of data points that show up between 68 and 79. So we do equals count ifs, open a set of parentheses, and the first thing we need to do is we need to tell it the data we're working with. So we're going to go back up here, we're going to highlight all of our data. We're going to put a comma and quotation marks, and we want all of this data, we're going to count if it's greater than, if it's greater than or equal to 68, and we're going to close that set of parentheses. And then put another comma. So that's the first thing we're counting. And we're also going to count when the data, so you go back up here, you highlight your data, another comma and another quotation marks, and when it's less than or equal to 79. And quotation marks, close that set of parentheses, and when we hit enter, again we're counting if the data is between or is greater than or equal to 68 and is also less than or equal to 79. Okay, so I'm hoping people can kind of see that. I'm going to do this a couple more times though. And then if we just hit enter, it's counting that number of things. Okay, and we could go back up and check, but that is right. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for each of these classes. So equals count ifs, open a set of parentheses. We're going to highlight all of our data, comma, quotation marks, and in this case it's going to be greater than or equal to 80, quotation marks, comma, and the data comma quotation marks is less than or equal to 91. Close quotation marks, close parentheses, hit enter, and it counts that the number of data pieces inside that range. And then we do the same thing. So equals count ifs, open a set of parentheses. We need our data, comma, quotation marks to be less than, greater than or equal to 92. Whoops, I don't need to do that. I need to do this. 92, close quotation marks, close comma, and our data is less than or equal to 103. Close quotation marks, close parentheses, hit enter, and it counts the number of data pieces that are between 92 and 103. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to do this for these next couple of classes. Just to kind of speed this up, I did 3 of them. And you should be able to see the next 4, but I want to kind of continue this without taking up too much time. Okay, so that's all of the frequencies, right? So there are 2 pieces of data in class 1. There's 5 pieces of data in class 2. There's 9 pieces of data in class 4. 9 in class 3. 23 in 4. 17 in 5. 2 in 6. And 2 in class 7. Okay. That is part B of all this. Okay. So I'm going to make some space. Okay. Part C says create a histogram with the table you made for part B. Okay, so we want to use this data and we just want to make a histogram. I'm keeping this really simple. We're just using this data. Okay. We could kind of make our chart really, really slick. Right now, I just want to be able to build a chart. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight. Actually, there is a way we could do that, but it's too late. We're going to highlight our data. We're going to go up to the top, very, very top above the gray to insert. And yours might look a little bit different than mine. That's okay. There's going to be some charts up in the middle, kind of above this E, right? We want a histogram, which is going to look like one of these bar charts, all right? Right, and we could clean this up. We could make a chart title. We could make our x-axis a little bit better. We will practice that as we go. And these on the left, ideally they have like units and all that stuff. I'm not really worried about that right now. Right now, I just want us to be able to make a table and then make a chart. Okay, so that's part C. I guess I skip part D and go directly to part E because I can't say my alphabet. Which is fine. Identify the shape of the distribution. Okay. So there are 4 different shapes. I'm going to just type them out. There is uniform, which is just a level distribution, right? So all of them would be like 10 or something like that. Right? So class 1 would be 10, class 2 would be 10, class 3 would be 10, and so on and so forth. Okay. Then there is a what they call Mound Symmetric. That's also known as normal, which is like a bell, right? So that would, how can I do that? It looks like an upside down bell. That's the easiest way I can explain it. I'm trying to draw it. There's no reason for that. It just looks like an upside down bell. Okay. Which this, I would take that for this chart. Okay, so there's uniform, there's Mound Symmetric, there's skew left, which is right a tiny tail on the left end, and then it kind of all the data tends toward the right. And then there is skew right, which is where all the data tends to the left and it tails off toward the right. Okay, so those are the 4 types of distribution that you could see. This chart right here, I would probably think it's more Mound Symmetric than anything. There is a case to be made that it could be considered skew right, but all of the data tends toward the middle. So I would say Mound Symmetric or normal. So that would be our answer for this. Okay. So that's part E. Mound Symmetric or normal. Okay. That'd be the distribution for this chart. All right. So that's number 1. That's really like kind of the long part. Okay. Number 2, almost everyone files or will someday file a federal income tax return. A research poll for TurboTax asked what aspect of filing a return people thought to be most difficult. The results showed that 43% of the respondents said understanding the IRS jargon. Okay, so let's just write that down. So understanding, that's 43%. 28% said knowing the deductions. And again, we could clean up the language and all that stuff, but that's okay. Correct form, that's 10%. Calculations was 8%. And then didn't know is 10. Okay. What we want to do is we want to make a circle graph to display this information. So all we have to do is we have to highlight all of this, right? So our reasons and our data. We go up to insert again, and again, this might look different, but up above that E, there's an insert pie or donut chart. You can pick whatever you want. I would probably just pick this one. These are a little bit interesting. You can pick this one. You can pick the donut. Doesn't really matter. And then what I would like you to do is to actually label this. So our chart title, and all I want you to do is make a chart title. But difficulties with filing taxes, right? Something like that. And then all the reasons are down here that corresponds to the colors. Everything looks good on this, and then we're done. Okay, so make the pie chart. So first of all, extract the data and with the reasons, make the pie chart or donut chart or whatever, and then just make sure that chart has a title, and then that's that. Okay. Number 3, which I think is the last one. Yep. Make a Pareto chart for the following data. So this data is the causes of lateness. There's a cause and there's a frequency. That's right. I changed this. Okay. So I'm going to clean this up. Okay. So I'm going to give you some data, right? Snoozing after alarm goes off. There's 15 people. Car trouble, 5 people. Too long over breakfast, that should say. I can actually make this bigger. Last minute studying, 20. Finding something to wear, 8. Talking too long with roommates, 9. And other, 3. So we want to make a Pareto chart for the following data. All right. A Pareto chart is just a bar graph that is in order from largest frequency to lowest frequency. So the first thing we need to do is we need to highlight this data, and we need to make sure that the largest is on top and the minimum is down bottom. So the easiest way that I know how to do that is to go up to sort and filter, which again is above the IJ. Awesome. I'm almost at 200. So we go up to sort and filter. We go to custom sort. We are going to sort by the data in column B, which I actually have labeled as frequency. And we want to sort from largest to smallest. Making that bigger isn't going to help, so I apologize. Then we hit OK, and that sorts out the data. And then all we need to do is we highlight that data again, go to Insert. We want to make a bar graph. And then make a title. Right, and that's that. That's everything I'm asking you to do. Okay. So the longest thing, I think number 2 and 3 should be pretty easy. Number 1 is going to take the longest amount of time. Okay, so making this stem and leaf display, that's not hard. There's just a little bit of like kind of longer calculation by just putting everything in order like I did way over here. Everything else should be reasonably okay. All right. Part B, that's going to take a minute. Making the classes, right, by finding the class sizes and then actually splitting them up into different classes. Okay, that's going to take a little bit of time. Creating the histogram, that shouldn't take a whole lot. And then identifying the distribution, that should be relatively easy as well. Okay, and then 2 and 3, that should take no longer than like 10 minutes combined. All right. So that is all I have. I'm going to leave this open for a couple minutes. Let's say if there's no questions by 8 o'clock, then I will shut this down. So that's 5 minutes from now. Okay. For now, though, I'm going to just have my cursor on one of these things. You might be able to zoom in and see. Actually, I'll just do it down here. I'll do it again down here so people can see it. And I'm going to make this really big so the entire thing shows. Okay, so this is what I have for that class 2 equation. So I'll just leave that open for a second. And again, if there's no questions by 8 o'clock, which is now in 4 minutes, I'll shut it down and we'll be done. All right, so I'll mute myself and I'll wait any questions that you have. Mateo, I don't know where that number is coming from, but you're not right. I gotcha. 199 subscribers. Okay. Great. Fantastic. Is this an Excel class or a math class? This is a stats class, but we are in the portion of stats class where we're just kind of defining things. And chapter 2 is pretty much just all over creating charts. All right, so it's creating bar graphs, pie charts, histograms, all that stuff. And I figure since that stuff isn't super hard by hand, usually what you're going to do is use Excel anyway. So I just kind of built it in. I told Coach Hutch that, and he was very excited because he uses Excel all the time. So this is what I came up with. I think it does the job. It gets people involved in Excel, which is a good skill to have. But no, the entire class is not going to be Excel. Mostly just this portion. We might do some other work in Excel, but not the entire time. Is this a real class, or are you just doing this stream for fun? This is a real class. Hutch puts his entire schedule for every day on Excel. I know. He's a little bit nutty with Excel. He's done some crazy things with it. He's actually probably way better at Excel than I am. He knows a lot more than I do. But yes, this is a real class. Though, well, no, there's tutorials on how to do all this stuff. Well, we have the formulas for the tests. No, you will not. I'm kind of hoping that since we've done this several times in class that we know it. Okay, we should have a couple of these saved where you should just be able to look at the formulas, and these formulas really should make sense. The only formula we really have to kind of know is the one that you can see on screen right now, this count ifs. But really, that should make sense, right? This blue part, A3J8, that says the data is greater than or equal to 80, and the data is less than or equal to 91. Okay, so that should be right. We should know that by now. Did you take stats in college? Yes, I actually stats was one of my that was like when you're in math, you like quote unquote specialize in two different things. And I did differential equations, which is just like calculus on steroids, and then stats, which also turned out to be calculus on steroids. But I didn't do all of this like charts and definition stuff. Um, I just did the heavy math portion of it. This is great, and it's probably way more useful than what I did, but I'm not used to this stuff. I got a 98 in my Excel exam. Nice. Did the stuff that we did last year at least somewhat set you up? I always wonder that. That's good to hear, Jonah. Who taught you Excel then? Yourself? Kind of. Yeah, I mean, I had I think in high school we used it a couple of times, but I didn't really learn a whole lot. Everything else has just kind of been playing with it. I had to use it in biology lab a lot and chem lab. And I think I had two chem labs that used it a lot. And then I also had two bio labs that used it a whole bunch. So I learned a lot from those two. It's just better to know it in high school and kind of be able to maneuver around it than doing it the night before lab report is due. Koro, I don't know who you are. But just beyond the point, it's 8:02. So there are no other questions. So I can leave this up for a minute. Surprisingly, a very active chat, which is fine. But if there are no other questions, let's say in 2 minutes, I'll shut it down. Um, and then we'll see you tomorrow morning. Should I do a giveaway for 200 subscribers? Thank you, Andrew. I'm sure it was just you. All right, this is we're there's no question, so I'm gonna shut this down. This should be up relatively soon. It's not very long of a stream, so that's good. Um, but if you missed something or need to go back, this will be up probably immediately. I've been kind of trying to do it right, and it's been working. Thank you all. All right, so I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Good luck. If you have questions, please come in and ask me. All right, I will see you later.